Hey everyone, welcome to this week's edition of Title Scoop. So this week we're finishing our series on the homeowner's policy, and we're going to go over some of the basic guidelines for issuing the homeowner's policy of title insurance. So the first one that we like to say is make sure you're using the ANTIC-approved homeowner's policy of title insurance affidavit, similar to a lien affidavit, and if you haven't seen it, I actually have linked it in the email for this video. Second, you want to make sure that your owner, again, and we've said this the last 2 weeks, is a natural person or an estate planning entity. And we've defined those already, but again, you got to have that. You also want to make sure it's a bona fide sale. So not current ownership, I'm not selling to my husband and now he wants a homeowner's policy. It really needs to be a bona fide purchase. Now, you also only want to issue this on a 1 to 4 family, single family residence, freestanding structure, or a condominium. So when you're verifying that information, you're also going to want to look at your taxes and your assessments, because that's going to tell you whether one, it's a single family residence or a condo. It will also verify the address. So you want to verify your address because, again, just a reminder, we're giving that location coverage. So you want to make sure your address is the same for taxes and for the Schedule A. Now, you do want to make sure that it is an improved piece of property. And if you can't tell by all the information in your search and your taxes and in the GIS, you may want to go drive by the property and make sure, because it really does need to be an improved property. Otherwise, you should not be issuing the homeowner's policy. You also, when you have your search, are going to want to confirm that it is a subdivision that is platted. And that can either be established or it could be one that's a newly developed, but you want to make sure that it is established by the right laws for subdivisions. You also want to make sure it's a platted lot or a condominium unit. So again, if you get meets and bounds and you're not sure, reach out to your underwriter. There are some circumstances where it can be issued, but you need to get your underwriter's approval on that if you're going to do that. Also, if it's a builder sale or new construction, you want to make sure that this is a well-known builder, or it has a certificate of occupancy, or that there's utilities running to the land, right? Because you need to make sure, again, that we have a structure there and it's an improved structure. So next, you want to make sure that you keep the general exceptions for mechanics liens and for taxes and special assessments. You're not going to remove those, you're going to keep those. And if you have questions, again, on what exceptions you should and shouldn't be using, we do have the form for the states where it's available. So if you don't have that form, reach out and we're happy to provide that. Now, what if you have some circumstances where there's coverage, but maybe something comes up in your search? You might be able to insure the homeowner's policy by adding an exception. So say you find out that the land is not owner occupied. Maybe it has a renter in it, but they're asking for this homeowner's policy. Or maybe it's a vacation home. You may need to keep the rights of claims of parties in possession as an exception on your policy. Same thing as if you find water rights within your search, you probably need to add that water rights exception. And if you don't have that language, again, reach out to your underwriter. Now, what if you find out that there's a boundary or an encroachment issue when you're looking at all of your documents from your search or your GIS or various plat maps, things like that? You may need to add back in your easements or claims of easements or the encroachments, encumbrance, violations exception, depending on what the situation is. And again, anytime you have anything that's a little out of the ordinary or it's not matching exactly within the criteria, you probably want to reach out and find out if you can issue this. And we're going to go over a few situations in a little bit about that, but just find out whether you need to add an exception or whether you can't issue it at all and you should be issuing a standard owner's policy. Now, when you get the request for the homeowner's policy, there's a few things, and we've said some of these, but I just want to go over them again. You're going to want to verify a few things. You always want to verify that it's zoned properly for residential purposes and it's improved. So those are two things you need to make sure. You want to verify the street address of the property, make sure it's matching. You want to make sure it's a platted subdivision or a condo. You want to make sure it's taxed as a single tax parcel and not as part of a larger tax parcel. You also want to verify that access. You've got to make sure there's actual pedestrian or vehicular access to the property. You also want to make sure HOA assessments are paid, current, and there are no known restriction violations, and that if there's a right of first refusal, that it's not being exercised on this transaction. And then if there was construction, you need to make sure bills are paid. If there is not any construction, you do just need to verify, one, nothing is ongoing or planned, like pending construction. So again, if any of those pop up, reach out. Reminder, you do want to check your rate on this. Make sure you're charging the right rate because a lot of states do charge a little bit more for these, and make sure you're using the correct form. If you don't have the homeowner's policy form for your state, reach out to your underwriter. We can provide that for you. Now, here's a few reasons you may want to talk to your underwriter anyway if you're doing your search and these pop up. I've made a list because I thought it might be kind of helpful just for those situations. If you become aware of a violation of an existing restriction on the property, call your underwriter. If there's an existing violation of the subdivision laws or an obvious building permit violation, again, maybe you have something filed, a violation for a building ordinance, you may want to reach out and see whether we can do this or if it can be remedied. If you find out there is not vehicular access, gonna call your underwriter. If the existing structures encroach onto an easement or building setback line, again, we're giving that coverage, you wanna make sure that you can actually provide this, the homeowner's policy, or maybe, again, we may need to do the standard owner's policy. If there exists a right to maintain or use an easement that could potentially damage a structure, then call the underwriter. And then last, if there's a future right of the surface of the land for extraction or development of minerals, call your underwriter. So I know I said call your underwriter a lot, but again, just want to make sure that if things do not line up with the questions you're asking, that maybe you need to issue a different kind of policy, or maybe there's an exception. So with that, that is the end of our homeowners policy series. I know this one was a little bit longer, but with that, we will see you next week.